Dear students, welcome to the second part of my video on Cheryll Glotfelty's introduction to the anthology, The Eco-Criticism Reader. The title of the essay is Literary Studies in an Age of Environmental Crisis. This is meant for PG English Language and Literature students. I am Dr. T.C. Brinda Kumari, Research Guide and former HOD, Mercy College, Palakkad. Please listen to the first part of my video. I have discussed some of the sections from this essay in my first video. This part begins with the section, The Humanities and Environmental Crisis. The section I am going to explain the section, The Humanities and the Environmental Crisis. Glotfelty says that humanities and literary studies have a significant role to play to awaken the consciousness of society to the threats of excessive exploitation of the natural resources. The writer says that most of our environmental problems are byproducts of culture. Therefore, we have to find ways to improve nature. The section, The Humanities and Environmental Crisis, discusses the contribution made by other disciplines like history, anthropology, philosophy, and psychology toward the awareness of environmental crisis. Historians write environmental histories and study reciprocal relationships between human beings and land. They trace the connections among environmental conditions, economic mode of production, and cultural ideas through time. Anthropologists, while delving deep into the primal cultures, make us aware of the eco-friendly value systems and rituals of the primitive races. Psychology has always ignored nature and given prime importance to mind. However, recently, contemporary psychologists have started exploring the connection between environmental conditions and mental health. In philosophy, subfields like environmental ethics, deep ecology, ecofeminism, and social ecology emerged as an attempt to understand the reasons for environmental degradation. Now let's have a look at these terms. First one, environmental ethics. Environmental ethics is a branch of philosophy which examines the moral relationship between human beings and the environment. It explores ethical questions raised by human relationship with the non-human environment. While discussing what humans should do, it discusses the importance of environmental issues. Key concepts in environmental ethics are anthropocentrism, biocentrism, ecocentrism, and ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism is the belief that human interests are central to environmental ethics. Biocentrism is the belief that all living things have intrinsic value. Ecocentrism is the belief that environment has intrinsic value. Examples of environmental ethical issues are deforestation, climate change caused by human activities, pollution of air, water, and soil by harmful substances, overconsumption of resources, and animal welfare. Next, we are going to see what deep ecology is. The term deep ecology was coined by Norwegian philosopher Arne Naess in 1970s. It is built upon earlier environmental movements and incorporates elements of Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. Deep ecology suggests that nature has a right to exist of its own without being exploited by human beings. It's a philosophy which emphasizes the intrinsic value of nature. It discusses the interconnectedness of all living things. It advocates a lifestyle that respects and coexists with nature. It proposes a holistic view. Next term, ecofeminism. Ecofeminism is a theory which includes feminist principles and ecological concerns. It is a philosophical and political movement. It connects domination of women with the domination of nature in a patriarchal system. It criticizes exploitation of women and exploitation of nature. It addresses the interconnected crisis of gender inequality and environmental damage. Next, social ecology. Social ecology is an interdisciplinary field. It studies the complex relationships between human societies and their environment. It examines how social structures, institutions, and human behavior influence and are influenced by ecological systems. It examines how social issues like inequality, power dynamics, etc. contribute to environmental problems and how environmental problems affect society. Attempts are made in many areas of knowledge to find out the reasons for the degradation of nature. Literary scholars specialize in questions of value, meaning, tradition, point of view, and language. It is in these areas that they are making substantial contributions to environmental thinking. Next section, Survey of Eco-Criticism in America. It is in this section that Glotfelty has compared Showalter's gyno-criticism with eco-criticism. She has taken Showalter's model of the development of feminist criticism as a base to explain various stages in eco-criticism. Showalter has stated that there are 3 stages in feminist criticism. The first stage in feminist criticism is concerned with how women are portrayed in a stereotyped manner in literature. It speaks about how women in literature are represented either as instruments of pleasure or models of immense sacrifice. These studies contribute to the vital process of consciousness. It locates the absence of real woman in literature. It disclaims the proclaimed universality and aesthetic value in these literatures which deny the real experience of women. Analogous efforts in eco-criticism examine how nature is represented in literature. Nature was represented in a stereotyped manner. Real natural world is not represented in the portrayal of Eden, Arcadia, or in savage wilderness. Nature is not the only focus of eco-critical studies of representation. Other topics include the frontier, animals, cities, rivers, mountains, garbage, and even the body. Showalter's feminist theory is taken as a model by Glotfelty. In the second stage of feminist criticism, literature by women is rediscovered and the readers are made aware of the real experience of women. Eco-critics examine how nature writing is neglected over centuries, how many literary figures try to write about nature or nature-oriented work of fiction and non-fiction, and also how much have the environmental conditions of these writers affected their imagination. The tradition of nature-oriented non-fiction originated in England with Gilbert White's A Natural History of Selborne. Another attempt is made to examine mainstream genres. It examines and identifies fiction and poetry of writers like Willa Cather, Robinson Jeffers, and Alice Walker, whose works manifest ecological awareness. Corresponding to the feminist interest in the lives of women authors, eco-critics have studied the environmental conditions of an author's life and examined how much the environmental conditions have influenced the imagination of the writer. The third stage which Showalter identifies is theoretical phase, which is very complex. This is drawing on a wide range of theories to raise fundamental questions about the symbolic construction of gender and sexuality within literary discourse. Similarly, in eco-criticism, theoretical phase includes examining the symbolic construction of species, mostly human beings. How is human beings defined is very important. This questions the dualism prevalent in Western thought. Dualism separates meaning from matter, severs mind from body, divides man from woman, and humanity from nature. When we examine the symbolic construction of human beings, we are made to question the Western thought because of its dualistic inclination. Dualism is not promoted by eco-critics. In Western thought, nature is understood as dualistically opposed to culture or humanity. It positions humans as fundamentally outside nature. Related endeavors had been carried out under the label of ecofeminism, a theoretical discourse, the theme of which is the link between the oppression of women and the domination of nature. Another project is ecological poetics. Here, energy flow is taken as a metaphor for the way poetry functions in society. Eco-critics also consider the philosophy currently known as deep ecology, the future of eco-criticism. Glotfelty says that an ecologically focused criticism is really good because its focus will be on matters which are very important to us in our daily life. It will help to raise the consciousness of the public regarding the dangers and risks involved in environment due to human action. A strong voice in the profession can, she hopes, influence university policies. Glotfelty says that eco-critics have great aspiration to see eco-criticism a chapter in the book that redraws the boundary of literary studies. She hopes the universities create certain positions like professor in the Department of Environmental Science. She also hopes that eco-critical scholarship will become more interdisciplinary, multicultural, and international. She says that students should be encouraged to take literature and environmental studies. Eco-criticism is at present predominantly a white movement, but it can be made a multi-ethnic movement by making stronger connections between the environment and the issues of social justice. Next section is essays in this collection. Glotfelty speaks about the essays that are included in the anthology, The Eco-Criticism Reader. During Glotfelty's period, eco-criticism was a new area, so she hopes that this book will provide an entry into the field of eco-criticism and act as an introductory text to those who are interested in learning and teaching environmental studies. She says that the essays in this anthology will provide an answer to the question, what is eco-criticism? This anthology contains seminal and representative essays that represent contemporary eco-critical approach, which include works on eco-criticism written earlier and often neglected. The essays selected in this anthology are written in simple, lucid style, which enables the reader to see the world from a new perspective. They are meant to introduce a new literature like Native American literature, which carries ecological wisdom in its songs and stories. Some essays explain theories like Bakhtinian dialogics and connect them with ecology. This book is divided into 3 sections reflecting the 3 major phases of eco-critical work. First is theory. The writers in this anthology have raised some fundamental questions about the relationship between nature and culture. They have tried to give a theoretical foundation so that some ecological theory may evolve. The second section is the representation of nature in fiction and drama. The third section focuses on environmental literature in America, which includes reflections on ecological significance of literary modes and narrative structure. Next section is eco-theory, reflections on nature and culture. In the first section, what we find is a theoretical reflection on nature and culture. It is all about the possibility of framing a theoretical structure. Lynn White Jr., in his essay, The Historical Roots of Our Ecologic Crisis, argues that even from historical times, nature has been alienated from human life. Even though primitive religions like paganism were in communion with nature, Judaism and Christianity had made man the center center. Environmental crisis has started from time immemorial. Christopher Main's essay, Nature and Silence, uses Mikhail Foucault's theory. He argues that nature has shifted from its animistic presence to symbolic presence, from a voluble subject to mute object in Western discourse. Another essay by Harold From Transcendence to Obsolescence, a route map, speaks about how industrialization affected humanity's idea of its relationship to nature. He argues that our life is actually dependent on natural support systems. The next two essays. In the first section, analyze how linguistically and aesthetically we can interact with nature. Frederick Turner, in his essay, Cultivating the American Garden, focuses on the problem of defining nature. He discusses cooking, music, landscape, painting, and gardening as healthy mediators between culture and nature. The next three essays of the eco-theory turn to the science of ecology and examine how environmental discipline can be applied to literary art. William Howard's Some Principles of Eco-Criticism suggests ways to develop partnership between science and humanity, which are cultures which are often taken as enemy cultures. It was William Ruckert, in his essay Literature and Ecology, an Experiment in Eco-Criticism, who coined the term eco-criticism. To him, poem is a stored energy, reading is an energy transfer, critics and teachers are mediators between poetry and biospace. Sue Ellen Campbell, in the essay The Land and Language of Desire, where deep ecology and post-structuralism meet, finds a parallel between post-structuralism and ecological philosophy. David Maisel's American Literary Environmentalism as Domestic Orientalism brings in certain theories to argue that the construction of the environment is itself an exercise of culture power. These critics posit environmentalistic versions of post-structuralism and the environmental dimension in the post-structural theory. Next section, eco-critical considerations of fiction and drama. This part of the essay deals with the second section of the anthology. This part opens with two literary narrative traditions, the male and the female traditions. The male and the female. Ursula K. Le Guin, in her essay, The Career Bag Theory of Fiction, argues that the male activity of hunting has caused the origin of death stories, and the primitive female activity of seed gathering has produced the tradition of life stories, which have in them cyclical sense of time. Another essay in this section is a chapter from Joseph W. Meeker's work, The Comedy of Survival. According to Meeker, writing is a characteristic of man and it is similar to flights in birds. It is natural. He has coined the term literary ecology. He discusses comedy and tragedy in his essay. He argues that comedy promotes health, wealth, and survival values, while tragedy is maladaptive. The other two remaining essays work on specific literary writings in America from the colonial period to the postmodern. The final two essays in this section consider postmodern and post-natural literature. The essays argue that there is a basic shift in American consciousness. In postmodern novels, there are many references to garbage, indicating a shift in historical consciousness. Till then, only fertile land is glorified. The essays observe that in modernism, the roots of culture lie in nature, whereas in postmodernism, nature is replaced by commodified representation. Nature is turned to commodity. Next section, critical studies and environmental literature. This part of the essay deals with section 3 of the anthology. One of the main essays in this section is Glenn A. Love's Revaluing Nature Toward an Ecological Criticism. This essay is, according to Glotfelty, one of the most influential essays of the current ecological movement. Love argues that literary studies have remained indifferent to the environmental crisis may be because of literature's limited humanistic vision. Literature has reflected anthropocentric vision which is related to Western thought. She recommends that revaluing nature-oriented literature will help us develop our eco-consciousness. There were nature-oriented literature in the past, but they were relegated to the margin. The willingness to revalue nature-oriented literature has led many leaders to seek wisdom in Native American texts. This section discusses some of the Native American writers like Paula Gunn Allen and Leslie Marmon Silko. Native Americans have their own myths and ritualistic practices, their own stories of origin, which are different from the Western stories of the origin of the earth. Paula Gunn Allen's book, The Sacred Hoop, A Contemporary Perspective, speaks about different ways of perceiving reality and also some of the fundamental assumptions of Native Americans. Leslie Marmon Silko is a Laguna Pueblo storyteller. Her essay, Landscape, History and the Pueblo Imagination, is about the perception of life of the Pueblo people, their rights including medicinal rights, and their relationship to land. Pueblo oral narratives function to explain the world, to help people survive in it and to transmit culture. Next paragraph in the text. Okay, you have to closely follow the text. Next paragraph discusses the importance of reviving nature writing. Glotfelty says that another developing form in environmental literature in America is the genre of nature writing. The remaining essays in the anthology, The Eco-Criticism Reader, provide an introduction to nature writing and represent a broad spectrum of critical approach to it. One of the essays in the third section of the book is Thomas J. Lyon's A Taxonomy of Nature Writing. Lyon speaks about three important dimensions of nature writing: existing nature or natural history, our response to nature, and the philosophical interpretations of nature. Michael Branch argues that Thoreau is not the pioneer of American nature writing. There are nature lovers like Bartram, Wilson, and Audubon, even though they are not writers. Bartram is a botanist. Wilson is an ornithologist who is interested in the study of birds, and Audubon is a painter, but all of them are interested in nature and have written their experiences with nature. Thoreau is the direct heir of the early Romantic natural historians, and his attempts deserve recognition. But he is not the first one who has initiated this genre of natural writing. The tradition of women's writing is also discussed in this essay. In this anthology, one of the essays observes that certain women authors like Carson and Dillard, though defend wild nature, prefer the safe and the tame dimension of nature. Michael J. McDowell's essay, The Bakhtinian Road to Ecological Insight, is discussed in the last part of the essay. This is a very important essay. McDowell argues that the concept of the Russian philosopher and literary critic Mikhail Bakhtin will be the apt one to be included in the literary studies. Bakhtin has combined natural sciences and social sciences. Bakhtin has introduced some of the principles and theories that are found in natural sciences like physics and chemistry in his critical thinking. McDowell argues that Bakhtin's literary theories can provide an ideal perspective for eco-criticism. And for Bakhtin's concepts of dialogic principle, chronotope and carnivalis can be applied in eco-criticism. This essay ends with this observation. Now let's have a look at these terms. Dialogics means intertextuality. Chronotope is the configuration of space and time. Carnivalis has come from the term carnivals, which celebrate life. There will be reversals of hierarchies in carnivals, and the characters often walk backward. Now we have come to the close of the essay. We are going to see some of the possible questions. I have already told you the first possible essay question. Cheryll Glotfelty's, I said it in the first part of my video, Cheryll Glotfelty's contribution in the development of eco-criticism as a literary theory. Then other possible questions, paragraph questions. The condition of all these paragraph questions you can study, which will help you to write the essay. Paragraph questions. The condition of literary studies in the postmodern age. Second question, how does Glotfelty challenge the claim that literary scholarship has responded to contemporary pressures? Next, trace the birth of environmental literary studies. Next, define eco-criticism. Next, what is the fundamental premise of ecological criticism? What is the difference between eco-criticism and other literary theories? What is the attitude of the theorists toward the taxonomic name of eco-criticism? What are the other names suggested to this theory? What is a common motivation that all eco-critical works share? How can the students and teachers of humanity contribute to environmental restoration? What are the contributions made in the areas of anthropology, psychology, philosophy, theology, and literature toward fostering environmental awareness? What is the first stage in feminist criticism? Similar attempt in eco-criticism. Showalter's second stage in feminist criticism and similar attempt in eco-criticism. Attempts in eco-criticism. Then next to the third stage in Showalter's feminist criticism and the analogous work in eco-criticism. Next question, what can universities do to foster eco-criticism? How do the essays in the anthology help eco-critical studies? What is the purpose of this anthology? What type of essays are included in this anthology? Now we have covered almost all the areas. The questions have covered almost all the areas. Hope these questions will help you. Please comment on this video. Your suggestions or comments are valuable to me. Thank you.